whatever comes, we'll face it together.
Let's go.
Impact event in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's get into Alien Romulus, the new movie from Fede Alvarez. Is it Fede or Fede?
Fede. It's not Fede Wap.
Okay. It is the latest entry in the Alien franchise. Notably a departure from what Ridley Scott was doing with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Alien Covenant came out in 2017, so this is the newest Alien movie since then. Not a continuation of the story in those movies with Michael Fassbender. Who knows if we'll ever get a third entry in that trilogy? I would love to see it, but this is very much its own thing. But it is connected to the original Ridley Scott movie. It is essentially kind of set in that same era. We're going to get into some specifics in spoilers as to how it very much directly ties into that movie. But we get a great selection of young actors in this cast, led by Cailee Spaeny, who's having a bit of a moment right now, coming off of Civil War and Priscilla. And David Jonsson as Andy, the android, who I think is by far the best part of this movie.
Yes, 100%.
I was very excited for this movie. I thought the trailers looked great. I thought the overall approach of the look and the style and the aesthetic that they were selling just looked phenomenal. And my wife Lee is a huge fan of Alien and Aliens, so we rewatched both of them in anticipation of this one. Also, she also tried to get me into the larger Alien universe with Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, which also star Sigourney Weaver. Maybe I'll give those a shot. I gave Alien 3 a shot, the David Fincher one. And it just didn't click. It didn't quite work. So maybe
if it helps, David Fincher doesn't think that movie works. So I think that
there's something cool in there. It's like a prison planet. It's grimy. It's dirty. There's some good stuff in there, but it didn't. That was not the priority. The priority was the original Ridley, the James Cameron Aliens, to gear up for Romulus, and then we went out on a date night to see Romulus, and I thought the movie had some incredible stuff in it, particularly the first half. I thought was kind of incredible, but there are some really weird and bad choices in this movie that don't quite ruin it, but keep it from being a great film. Like, I thought, sitting there watching the buildup of this movie, I thought it has an amazing buildup that harkens back to the original. It was just a very slow build. I thought, oh my God, did they do it? Is Fede like gonna give us something truly special here? Could we have like something close to the level of those, what are essentially like some of the best movies of all time, like true masterpieces of cinema with Alien and Aliens? And that's just not what this is, and maybe it was never destined to be, maybe it's not fair to kind of give it that set of expectations. I really think that that's very unrealistic, but the movie is reminding you of those films. It very much wants to be attached and in conversation with those films. So you can't help but be thinking these things. And so walking out of the theater, I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but I was very much, the main thoughts in my mind were the things that this movie did poorly rather than the things that it did right. And it does a lot of things right. I think there's so many amazing things about this movie, but the stuff that's not so good, the stuff that's bad,
it sticks out. It sticks out really bad.
It's a bit overshadowing. So we'll get into some specifics, but what are your thoughts on Alien Romulus?
I'm pretty lockstep with you on where you eventually settled with this movie. I do think that like it is some of the best production design that I have seen in just any sci-fi movie in a really long time. Like they really, really nailed this analog feeling to the alien universe whenever they're getting up in there. I like that it was just the setup of it being like a bunch of kids. It's not super scientists. It's not military or anything else. It's just some guys that are just trying to get off of this like horrible mining prison planet that they're on right now.
With no sun.
Which the whole design and how grimy that felt is just very, very cool. I think that it starts out pretty excellently, that whole first third. And then we'll get to it in spoilers, but like there's the introduction of a character into the story. And I think that the movie never recovers from that decision. It is like both simultaneously like a movie that is extremely well crafted. The splatter horror elements are extremely well executed, while also simultaneously being like one of the most creative bankrupt things that I've seen in a long time. Like it is something that felt bad while watching it. At one point I was like, is this kind of evil while watching this, that we're doing the things that this movie is doing? It felt icky. And I think that is what I'm assuming that's kind of what you're feeling about how like the bad kind of overshadowing the good whenever you're leaving the theater. Is that I was thinking of a lot of those parts. There's even like some callbacks to the original that are just like dumb and like don't even make sense, of like characters saying a line of like a "get away from her, you bitch." That's just like a why did we even feel the need to do things like that? But also this movie does have some fucking incredible set pieces. Like it does the horror thing really well. There's a face hugger sequence that is in the trailers where they all just start bursting out and running, and it is really affecting.
Yeah.
It's really affecting. It creates the same feeling of like whenever you see like a big spider outbreak or something like that, of them like moving around. It's like, oh God, I can feel them crawling around me. Like,
and it's things it's things that I feel like we've always wanted to see in an alien movie.
Yeah.
Right. We're so deep into this franchise that this movie is almost like, I think that one of the things that's not great about it, but you know, what are you going to do? It's very much a movie for the fans, right?
Yeah,
it's like
the fans.
Yeah. The fucking fans. It's very much a movie about like, we know that you know these movies and we're going to give you these hits of nostalgia and of new things that you've always wanted to see in these movies. What is it like to be killed by the acid blood? To have the acid blood drip over a guy and kill him?
They do some sick stuff with the acid blood in this movie. And like, that's what I'm talking about. Where like Fede definitely does have some ideas in this. And I say this as not a big Fede Alvarez fan. I
don't think I've seen any of his movies. Don't Breathe.
I'm not a big fan of the Evil Dead remake. I know that has a lot of fans, but I love the original Evil Dead movies, and like that ain't it. Like I think that some of the kills and some of the ideas are much more well executed in Romulus than even in the Evil Dead remake. But even still, I do think that you can see like why his vision, why they chose him to reboot this franchise, especially coming after Prometheus and especially Covenant, which were not as successful as Fox wanted them to be. Ridley was off really focused in on like, how can we make a story about like how aliens are actually gods, and this is the Xenomorph story we want to tell. The thing is that I love Prometheus. I really, really love that movie. It's our boy Lindelof.
It's an amazing movie, but it's not really an alien movie. When I talked to Lee about this, the kind of like what she sees as a major failing of Prometheus is that no one wants to see that be in relationship to Alien.
Yeah.
And my response is just like, Ridley Scott should do whatever the fuck he wants to do.
Have you heard about Ridley? I don't know if I think it was in like an interview they did around the time of, maybe it was around Covenant, not around Prometheus, where he like had this whole thing about he's just like, actually, Jesus Christ was one of the engineers, and the xenomorphs are coming back to Earth to kill the humans because they murdered one of their own.
Oh my god!
Like, these are the things that Ridley Scott is thinking about right now.
See this.
This is what Ridley is thinking of in his brain, is like how like we as humans are actually the failures, and we should really let the xenomorphs take over all of us. Like they were in the right. And
he tried to continue that with Covenant. A movie I rewatched last night, actually, because I'm just so curious just how it would feel in comparison to Romulus. I actually found it worse than Romulus. I remember being a bit of a defender of Covenant back when it came out, not like head over heels for it or anything, but I loved Prometheus. So of course I was going to also be defensive of its follow-up. And I found it to be an extremely compromised movie that tries to be a sequel to Prometheus and the ideas in that film, but doesn't commit to that, and is buried under what feels like a response to Prometheus, which is the fact that Prometheus...
Not enough kills. Yeah.
Well, not enough Alien. Like, you have Prometheus with barely I don't think there even is a xenomorph in Prometheus. They add it to Covenant, and it kind of works, but not really. And by the time you're watching kind of the final set piece, confrontation action sequence, it just doesn't click. And on the flip side, in Romulus, the entire last act of this movie is just a lining up of dominoes, one by one, of set piece after set piece after set piece, and it really feels like you are on rails, like you're on this track of just going through the Alien movies, like the kind of reliving the greatest hits of this entire franchise. And you brought up, creative bankruptcy. I think that definitely applies to this, and the fact that we're not trying to do something new as Ridley tried with his movies. We're kind of just rehashing what worked before. But if it worked then and we're kind of redoing it, it kind of works now. And it is a diluted version, definitely. But I found myself enjoying it. And it's cheap. It's not innovative, but it is effective. And we can get into the specifics and spoilers.
No, I do. I agree. And I want to move to spoilers pretty soon, because I say all this to say that like the ending, the last like 20 minutes or so did really work for me. I think my biggest issue is whenever the actual story is happening in that whole middle chunk where it gets really bogged down, and like it's simultaneously not an interesting xenomorph or engineer story, and also doesn't really have any great kills aside from like chest bursting out of the shaved head.
Yes.
Like
that was really good.
That, like there's kind of just a long stretch there where not a lot happens.
Yeah.
But yeah. Overall, I enjoyed it with reservations, I think, is kind of where I'm at with this movie.
Yeah. I wasn't bummed. I wasn't that disappointed, maybe slightly disappointed, but overall, I feel like this movie does what it's trying to do very well. And I disagree with some of the choices. We're going to talk about them momentarily, but ultimately, I do think that this is a good time at the movies if you want a nice late summer horror alien death fest. So let's get into spoilers for Alien Romulus. Let's talk about the big thing that everyone's talking about. Last chance to pause and come back once you've actually seen the movie. But the main, one of the big kind of big plot things that happens in this movie is the return of Ian Holm, kind of reprising his role as Ash from the original film. His name is Rook in this movie, so they're kind of doing the Fassbender thing where it's an android,
the same guy
that's different models of the same android, and they just have different names. But Hunter, did you know that Ian Holm passed away like 4 years ago?
Yeah, sure fucking did. That's what I meant. When I saw it, I was taken aback, but I was like, could almost like, you see him at first like laying there, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is just like one of those models.
They obscure it a lot. There's like, a lot of shots that are kind of in shadow before you get the close-up.
Yeah. And then dead Ian Holm has like the third most lines in the entire movie. Like he becomes a central character. And also he looks like a PS5 character.
It's really bad. It looks really, like really shit. Bad.
So it's like this is like the thing that like it was so appalling that it fully took me out of the movie. Where one, just from like a visual standpoint, it looks like shit. He looks like a video game character. It does not look well.
I think there's a couple shots that aren't that bad. Mostly the shots where he's not speaking.
Yeah, no. When he moves his head or something, it's like, ew, what is that? What am I looking at right now? The fuck?
Kill it.
I want to fucking stomp on it like it's a face hugger. No, it's a thing where it's just like he's talking and moving. So like it doesn't look great. Number two, I get that Ian Holm played an android in the story. He is still a dead actor, and you are resurrecting his corpse and then just using like AI, I'm assuming, to just kind of make him speak and use Ian Holm's voice. And that's what I mean when I'm just like, this feels evil. Like it feels icky when I'm watching this. It feels bad. I don't know why more people, maybe I'm just like the old man here in this situation, that more people aren't just like truly mortified by this in the same way that I am. But I was pretty horrified when I saw this happening.
It's a terrible choice. They should have never done it. Fede has tried to defend it. I think on the big picture, he said that they felt like it was the right choice because Ian Holm was wronged by Hollywood, and he would have loved to reprise this role. And he was the only android that never recurred. Bishop recurred, Fassbender recurred. Like you had this through line of like the android characters being able to come back, and he never did. But this is fucking Disney. This is Disney doing their Disney disgusting shit all over Alien. It's the same thing they did in Rogue One with the man who played Tarkin in the original Star Wars in the original Star Wars movie. A guy who'd been dead way longer. And they brought him back for Rogue One. It feels disgusting. It feels wrong. And it honestly feels like it wasn't even necessary. Like even in Star Wars, in Rogue One, I could see the argument there for why that character needs to be a part of that story. It's like, okay, yes, I could see it. But this is like, dude, there's no reason for that. You could cast any actor in that role. You don't need to bring back a dead actor. It's not a requirement.
It's also a thing where Tarkin is like, I don't know, and like has like 2 or 3 lines in it. Like that's
there's
it.
There's a couple extended scenes where you do see the horrible, disgusting CGI face.
It is gross. Like it does look bad, but like that's still such a smaller part of that movie as a whole. Again, dead Ian Holm's fucking Weekend at Bernie's corpse is just out there and has like the third most lines in this entire movie. Like, it doesn't look good enough, and it's not well executed enough, and it's not pertinent enough to the plot to ever have been included. Like, I don't really know how they got away with doing this. It's insane to me. It is such a wild choice. Not to mention that just like that, whenever I'm talking about it dragging in the middle, that's whenever we are really digging into the Rook stuff.
Yeah.
Because none of that stuff works. And we get to the best thing that comes out of it is that we get to see a little bit of range from our boy David Jonsson, but
he's so good in this.
He's great in it, but it's not because of like the script, especially in this section of it, because he's just playing.
It's just the performance
robot. Then,
yeah. Well, I found the turn that he has really well done, where he goes from being kind of this malfunctioning, kind of low IQ robot to now this hyper functioning machine that is there to serve the company. And, you know, I didn't expect this movie to be about anything, but I was curious in the setup if it was going to have some deeper ideas. And it seemed like it was going to maybe be about Weyland-Yutani and how oppressive of a force they are, and how horrible it is to be almost like a slave to this corporation. And the movie doesn't really explore that too much. But there are little bits throughout that tie into that theme of what it's like in this world to be, to have everything function as an extension of this super powerful like mega corporation, Weyland-Yutani. I like those bits. I really like this world, and I'm so fascinated by the expansion of it. I'm really excited for that Alien Earth show that Noah Hawley has been working on for a long time, coming next year. So there's little things in there that flesh out the mythos without going into all the Prometheus, who is our god stuff. So I really love, like I said, the setup, the first half of the movie where we're kind of just in the world. We're kind of getting this look at life on this colony, stuff that we haven't really seen before in these movies. But yeah, once we get Ian home, the movie really takes a turn. I did think it was necessary to have some of the exposition dump stuff because I was questioning. We do get that little bit at the very, very beginning of the xenomorph, like the fossilized xenomorph being taken into the ship. But I was thinking, like, why is this giant ship just abandoned?
Yeah.
And why is there a farm full of face hugger eggs? There were just a lot of questions as to like what is happening here that I did need a bit of the exposition dump, but it didn't have to be AI deepfake Ian Holm doing it.
I think that's, and I don't know if you kind of feel the same way as me, but I thought that's Ian Holm aside. I thought that this movie was more successful whenever it was trying to emulate Alien, and much less successful when it was trying to emulate Aliens. Right. Like, whenever it was more focused on the true small scale body horror, that feeling of claustrophobia, the unknown that's there. I think that works. When I guess it's teetering into the third act there, but whenever it's just like, we have a tunnel and there's like hundreds of xenomorphs that are in there, aside from the zero gravity floating through the alien blood, which is a cool set piece. I don't think that any of that stuff works as well. The like whole like having a pulse rifle and everything else in there, I didn't find any of that as interesting or as well executed as that analog stuff that we're talking about in the very beginning. It doesn't feel as tactile. I just think this because no one's Big Jim. No one can touch Big Fede, Jim. You ain't Jim. Like I think that the achievement of Aliens
is so much of those little details that you can't just regurgitate them and feel like you can approach that same level of perfection in Aliens. It's, I don't know, maybe there was more work put into some of the other stuff that is hearkening back to the Ridley version of the universe rather than the Cameron. But yeah, you're right. And also, you know, like I said earlier, I haven't watched all these movies, but it goes even further than that. You know, the little little baby guy that comes out.
Okay.
That is
guy
a resurrection. That is a resurrection thing, from what I know. I haven't seen Resurrection, but that might be for like the real sickos that love Alien Resurrection. They're like, oh my God, it's that fucker.
So I did not know that was an Alien Resurrection reference, but I will say, whenever that little fucking freaky boy popped on out of there, I cackled in my seat. I was like, this rocks. I love this.
The movie was kind of back. It was kind of back for a minute.
When he starts to go in to suckle on Mother's teeth,
yeah,
I was like,
Mommy?
let's go. Let's go. We're here. We're back.
Is that you?
I was like, this is so weird. Like, why didn't the rest of the movie have this level of weirdness? And then it just kind of becomes like whatever. But like, right. I really loved that whole sequence.
I'm very mixed on this whole final section of the movie, because I could feel it being so herky-jerky and inconsistent in a way that I didn't feel in the setup. For me, the setup, the buildup was very clean, very well done. Not perfect. I mean, I have a lot of complaints about these Riz Gen Z pirates. Dude, I kind of fucking hate some of these guys.
No, dude, that one Cockney bastard. Who the fuck is that guy?
I hate that guy.
He's like the worst guy that I have seen in a movie.
His name is Spike Fearn.
No, yeah, fuck you, Spike.
Yeah. All I could think about is guys used to look like Harry Dean Stanton in Alien. Why can't we get a guy that looks like that in this movie?
I want to start like modeling my wardrobe after Harry Dean Stanton and Alien, honestly.
And not just him
that I want.
The whole cast of that movie is just grimy and full of personality. And these guys in this movie in Romulus, they're a little too clean. You know, they're not as rugged and dirty and lived in. And the movie goes a long way to render the world, you know, that analog thing that you mentioned is very prevalent, and they do a lot of work to try to make it seem as close to that movie, the original movie, as possible. But there's still this filter, this clean filter over so much of it.
The problem is that in the same way that they can never recreate the scale of Big Jim and Aliens, they can never recreate the whole moment of the first time that you see Alien and you think that it is going to be an ensemble movie, and then slowly the chest burster scene happens, and then just all fucking chaos breaks loose.
Gone.
And it's like, that's one of those things where it's like, the audiences in 1979 were not expecting that, and if you were not seeing it for the first time, you're expecting it. Now going into Alien Romulus, it's like, all right, who's the lead? Cailee Spaeny? Yeah, she's going to be the one who lives, and that we can just kind of expect for all of these other guys to just be fucking redcoats, and like they're all just going to die at some point in time.
And but that's part of the magic of these movies, you know, and that's something that I enjoyed even revisiting Covenant, is that there is something cool about being introduced to a bunch of people that you don't really like that much, and then watching them all die. That there is a lot of enjoyment in that, right? Is like, I fucking hate this guy, and he's gonna die an awesome, horrible death, and I'm gonna love to see it. That's part of the enjoyment here. But you know, to tie back to the original, you know, there are so many little things that movie does so perfectly that this one just can't do. And it's not just in the visuals, it's not just in the overall aesthetic, it's in the very deliberate pacing and the way in which you're introduced into this horror of this xenomorph. This movie is incapable of doing that because it is so invested in reminding you that it knows that you know, right? It knows that you're a fan.
Yeah.
So it can't let go of that. So that's why you get Ian Holm, and that's why you get him basically off jump describing how the xenomorph works and why you should be scared of it. The original movie, the part of the magic is that there is no explanation. These people are just in it, and so are you as the viewer. That you are given basically no info. It is just death. It is just madness and destruction and chaos. And you don't really get that in this movie. That so much of this movie feels very controlled and feels very much like, I don't want to say safe, but there is no sense of like things kind of spinning out of control as much.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. This goes back to what you were talking about earlier about the Disney-fied approach to this.
Exactly.
They are really, and this goes for most properties. I mean, this goes for most adult films at this point, but they are so scared of losing the audience.
Maybe it is safe. Maybe safe is the right word. I
think that it is because they just want to make sure that like they are holding your hand and that you are still along for the ride and that they haven't lost you yet. Like that is the thing. They just want to bring along the masses with them, even if it is at the detriment overall to like the flow and the pacing of the story.
And a much more kind of untethered creative vision, right? Like part of the reason why Alien is so amazing is because there wasn't someone telling Ridley that he had to do all these things. He kind of went out on his own and made it happen. Right. And that's not really what this movie is doing. It's that not to say that Fede didn't get to be creative. There's a lot of creativity in this movie, but it does feel like it is within the bounds of some kind of studio mandate. And in the end, the entire thing does feel like you are at a Disney ride. It just kind of feels like you're on those dark boat rides and you're just watching the action happen in front of you. And those rides can be great. Those rides can be immersive and you can feel like you are entering a world, but you're always in the car. You're always protected. You're never like left to be fully out there on your own. That's kind of the feeling that this movie gives you. And, it doesn't fully fall apart, but it keeps it from being something more than what it otherwise is.
Yeah, no, I will say, I do think that like, I do have a greater appreciation for Fede Alvarez, like after seeing this movie, because I do think that he's somebody who he definitely had a sense of vision before in his other movies. So this was the first movie of his that I've seen where I was like, oh, he does really have an eye for these things. Like even something like the use, the sound design and the shot of the spaceship, their little like floater spaceship that they come in that's spinning out of control and like cycling around the ship as they're about to crash into it. Like there's just a lot of really, really great creative choices that take place in this otherwise corporate schlocky movie.
Right.
And maybe, I think that it was always going to be schlock. And I've kind of, as somebody who like Alien is in my top 5 movies ever, it's my favorite sci-fi movie. I know what this franchise is, and I still have an enjoyment for most, if not all, of the entries in them in this franchise, even if they don't all work. But they are all kind of the same story at this point.
You're coming
very much. There's a hard cap on these movies.
Yeah, you're coming in for a very specific set of criteria when you come in for an Alien movie.
They've embraced just becoming a slasher movie. Like they're no different than a Friday the 13th movie.
Right. I guess the only difference is that now it's, you're making it for the fans, so you got to make the fans happy.
Yeah. You did compare this in our group chat to the Apes movie.
Right.
Another Fox
Disney movie.
Which is also a movie that like very much wants to hold your hand. It's like, hey guys, remember the Planet of the Apes movies? Remember Caesar? We all love Caesar. Oh, okay, but we'll move on from. We're going to talk about how Caesar is really important.
I'm going to remind you.
And my biggest problem with that movie is like, yeah, you're reminding me of the movie that I liked more than this one as I was doing it. And the same criticism could be said about Romulus.
So a couple shout outs before we wrap up that I wanted to bring up. The zero gravity sequence. I liked it, but it made me appreciate Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning so much more. Whatever complaints I had about the train sequence in Dead Reckoning and how some of the stuff looked in that movie as the train carts are falling and stuff is like in some levels of zero gravity and whatnot. Holy shit, it looked way better than it did in this movie. Not that this movie looked bad, but it just reminded me of that sequence, and it just made me think like, man, this kind of looks a little cheap compared to Mission.
It was one of those things where the idea of zero gravity alien blood was cool, but then like in practice, it just kind of like
it's a little silly,
like stringy goo up in the air that they're just like swimming through. And yeah, it doesn't totally work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in the final act there that feel like we're just on a Disney ride. Like we're just going to the next room on the ride in the cart. And we're just turning a corner and like, oh wow, look at this. This is the aliens room, and this is the this is the elevator, and now this is the little fucker, the little alien hybrid guy. Which, by the way, that guy, I like that they tried it because, why not try something like that? It was laughable, a lot of it, just watching that guy fucking run around. I was
laughing. I had a fun, but here's the thing. I was like cackling when I saw it. Like it made me laugh out loud because I was like, what the fuck is that? Yeah. But like, I really don't know if I loved it or if I hated it. I think that overall I just enjoyed it because it was something different.
Exactly.
It wasn't just, we weren't just having like another xenomorph on the escape pod with them. It had to be something else that was different and weird. And
right. I like that. And then there's just a bunch of little things. Like I said at the very beginning, there are great things in this movie that are just overshadowed by the stuff that doesn't work. Like the whole idea of them wanting to be in this paradise world with sunshine because they never see the sun on this planet, I thought is a great idea. And there's these moments where you see these characters like taking in the sunlight that they never got when they're on the actual planet. I love little moments like that. And I just thought that the whole setup of this space station and the research being done there, again, Ian Holm aside, I thought that was all really compelling. Just the idea of that ship and them, kind of reverse engineering the xenomorphs and the goop, the Prometheus goop. So yeah, lots of cool stuff in there. But again, there's just a lot of questionable stuff too. So you're kind of left with a bit of a mixed bag. And I think overall, good but not great with Alien Romulus.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
With some big caveats and reservations.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can wrap it up there with Alien Romulus.